Welcome to our Bible study. This is Lesson 22 of the Bible Prophecy and the Book of Revelation by Dr. Bill Waddell.
Welcome, welcome. We're going to be in Revelation 17 tonight and 18. We're going to be covering quite a bit of ground because one is so related to the other. Once you've talked about one, you pretty much have the other one is sort of a, if we could say, a eulogy. Chapter 17 is the description of this woman who rides the beast. Chapter 18 is her eulogy. It's basically telling us she's dead now, and or then, whenever that is. And so you have that process, and so these things will be working together. So we're all going to be reading quite a bit of scripture tonight of Revelation. These are two of the largest chapters in Revelation, larger, 18 being one of the largest. All right, let's just read all of chapter 17, then we'll back up and discuss some things. Let's just have a general observation of our chapter. One of the angels of this, one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, and that's our previous chapter there. These bowls that were poured out, and so one of them, we don't know which one, laid down his bowl, comes over to John, and begins to give him insights into some of the things we were told back in chapter 14. This Babylon the Great. Who is this Babylon? What is this Babylon? And now one of the angels is going to give John insight into this, apparently sent there by God. One of the angels, the seven angels who had the seven bowls, came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, and with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. And those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality." So wow, she's tremendously influential. "And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names and having 7 heads and 10 horns. Oh, wait a minute. We know this one. We've already been introduced to this one, but we've never been introduced to him this way. So up until this point, you could assume he's the dominant one of the book of the end times, and I guess in conclusion, yes, he is, but not in the beginning. In the beginning, there is someone, something, some entity that is more powerful than him. Because you think about it, if I got a horse and the rider, which one's dominant? The horse or the rider? Obviously, the horse is way more powerful. I mean, if he wants to kill you, he can. But the rider certainly got his bluff in on him and is controlling him, and the same is true here. The rider here is the one that's got the bluff in and is controlling even the beast. So you got this great personage of the Antichrist, and at least initially, he's going to be dominated by this whatever this is, this entity, this spiritual woman. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones. This is all identifications of her, by the way. Having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations, of the unclean things of her immorality, and upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery. Something, not a mystery like a whodunit, Nancy and Drew. Is that the books? Okay. Not one of those. A mystery is, in other words, something you couldn't know unless God otherwise told you. You're not going to search it out and find it. That kind of mystery. Now God's revealing it. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints. So she not only makes people drunk, as it says there, with her abominations, but also she herself is. And the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Wow. So she's bad. She's really bad. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. So John is blown away by this. This is insightful John. This is elderly John. This is a man who has pretty good swing, I would say, as far as the scriptures are concerned. And yet when he sees this, he's just like, never saw this coming. I never could imagine this. So that's instructive. The angel said to me, "Why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world." So if you want to know about that book, by the way, you're either in there or you ain't in there. And we won't know until it all shakes out, but God is, of course, always known. I mean, doesn't God know everything? So doesn't he know who's going to be in heaven and who won't be? Of course. He has to know that stuff. So, of course, there's a book. Why not? God's a bookkeeper, whose names have not been written in the book of life since the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, that he was and that he is not and that he will come. So they're blown away that this beast used to exist but currently doesn't, but in the future will. It's just going to be mind-boggling to them. Here's the mind that has wisdom. We're asking God to give us that wisdom, right? The 7 heads are 7 mountains or 7 hills on which the woman sits. This is instructive. It tells us who she is. And they are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain for a little while. And the beast which was and is not, and is himself an 8th. So you had 7, now we're getting an 8th only out of 7. But notice, and he is one of the 7. So how can you be the 7th and the 8th? We saw that before, because the Antichrist has a part 1 and a part 2. He has a pre-death Antichrist, and you have a post-death resurrected Antichrist. That's how you get that. And he goes to his destruction. We keep being told this over and over again. He's going to lose. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. And these have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. They're his regime. And these will wage war, the 10 kings and the beast, with the Lamb. Pretty dumb. And the Lamb will overcome them. Notice the reason why. Not because he's tougher, not because he's meaner, not because he's got bigger weapons, not because he's faster, not because he's a better tactician. Why? Because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. In other words, just simply who he is will be their defeat. And those who are with him are called the chosen and few. That's, by the way, chosen and faithful. That's you. That's you if you're a believer in Christ. Notice, you'll be with him. You'll be riding with him. He said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits were peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, they will hate the harlot. Who wants to be dominated? The Antichrist does not. And he's gonna make an end of her. No one else has been able to do this. She's dominated many kings. She's overthrown many and controlled many. This one finally is going to be able to wipe her out. These will hate the harlot and will make her desolate. They're not new in that. Many kings, many regimes have hated her. Couldn't stop her though. They will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh. You think of a queen, a woman who was eaten. And they will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is the great city. It's interesting how he changes here. He's not talking about, this is not future tense. He's speaking to John, or John is speaking in the present tense. So if all we knew was that verse, and if we say, and the woman I saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. John lived in AD 90 when he's writing this, roughly. So what would be present tense, the great city rules over the kings of the earth in AD 90? It would be Rome. It would be unquestionably Rome. So we may need to go no further than just simply to say, that's who this woman is, just based upon that verse. There's a lot of other verses here that speak to that effect, but maybe none clearer than that one. But let's just leave it as an assumption, and let's build our point here. So first of all, let's just discuss a few things. In many ways, the Bible is a tale of two cities: the city of man, Babylon; the city of God, Jerusalem. These are in juxtaposition all the way through, all the way from Genesis all the way to Revelation. Babel, the city of confusion; Jerusalem, the city of peace. Babel, where man makes a name for himself, right? Remember, they make this tower. We don't need God. We can make a tower up to the heavens, and they use that tower as a place to create this grid. I think we talked about it. And they would cast on top of that grid these bones, and it was called what we know today as casting the horoscope. and they will allow the sun and the moon and the stars to determine their destiny based upon this grid, and it would fall on certain constellations and stuff, and they would know that constellation was directing them. And we say it today, one of the exclamations of the little old ladies where I grew up in East Texas were, "Oh, my stars." It's actually very pagan, very pagan. If the stars align, we say that. Where do they come from? Very old, very wicked background of humanity. It's out of Babylon. If a man makes a name for himself in Babylon, God places his name forever in one city only, Jerusalem. So it's a tale of two cities. All occultic practices effectively have their roots in Babylon. And the only two God-ordained religions are actually come from Jerusalem. First, Judaism. Judaism ended at the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And then from then on, Christianity has its birth there and has existed up until now. So three major identifications we have to make. There's some lesser ones, but three major ones we have to make in the end times. Number one, of course, is the Antichrist. Who is this guy? And we're given information about the number of his name. We know about gematria. We talked about that. There are many names that could add up to 666, but how those organize and how those come together, even which language do we use? We get our gematria from Greek? Do we get it from Hebrew? Do we get it from Latin? And so these are all questions that we can't answer, at least at the present. So we need to find out. We need to know who the Antichrist is. We need to know what his regime is. Who are these 10 kings? Rome rule the known world. So really, Rome could be any conglomeration of 10 things. Everybody got super excited after World War II when they started signing all these pacts in Europe, and Europe started coming together to what we know today as the European Union. Everybody got real thrilled when it turned out to be 10 kingdoms came together. Like, oh, here we go. That was in 1950-something, by the way, so it didn't happen. It wasn't a year later, they went up to 12. It was like, okay, well, that's out. It couldn't be that. At least the current organization of Europe. But again, if you think of Rome as only Europe, you're missing the point. Rome ruled Turkey, ruled the Middle East, ruled North Africa, ruled way over close to India. I mean, they were at different points. So what is Rome? Rome basically is really the rest of the world outside of Israel. So it's a large question. So what is his regime? What are these 10 kings going to be? And the final personage, the final identification we need to make is, who is this harlot? And I would suggest to you that the best chance of the three that we have to put our finger on one of them and say we're pretty sure what that one is. It is the harlot. Antichrist, the regime of the beast. That's pretty hard to come up with, at least in my opinion at this point. But the woman, I think we can come to some pretty good conclusions. So let's go over at least 10 major clues as to the identity of this woman. Clue number one: she's a prostitute. That's what she is. It's a spiritual prostitution. Spiritual prostitution is effectively this: she's supposed to be wedded. She's supposed to be the love of God. God's created all of us to belong to him. When we prostitute ourselves, when we turn ourselves over to something else, that's a spiritual prostitution. She's the head of that. She's the poster child. She's the inventor, the promoter. She's the creator of other prostitutes. We'll see another one of these clues here. The only entity, individual, or group of people who have ever been called this in the scriptures was actually Israel. Israel's referred. You got a whole book of Hosea that talks about this. Starts off with this Hosea being told to go marry a prostitute. Just like, wow, like I said, disciples can do some weird things because God can call you to do stuff. Isaiah spends, I think, a couple of years naked. Disciples can do some weird stuff. So he goes and marries this prostitute, and then she, of course, continues to sleep around on him. They have, I believe, 3 kids together. Based upon the names, only one of them is he sure is his. The other 2 he's pretty sure aren't. Of course, they didn't have DNA tests and stuff like that back then. It's just real life situation. And then she goes off and he loses track of her for a while. And then he finds her on a block being sold. By the way, naked. That's the way they sold slaves. She was sold naked as a slave, and God says, you go back and buy her back. And you take her to live with you, and you instruct her this way. And he says, the picture of what you've just went through, but here's Hosea in a short description. The picture of what you experience with this woman is the picture of my relationship with Israel. who's prostituted herself. She sold herself, and I'm going to buy her back. And I'm going to love her, and she's going to be mine, and she's going to be committed to me forever and ever. And it's just God's determination to have Israel as his bride. And so you have this whole imagery of this prostitution, and Israel's the only one been called that in the entire Bible. So it has to be prostitution. It means you had something legitimate that became illegitimate. So that's really what's happening here. So number one, she's a prostitute. Number two, she's influential. In fact, she's global. She's worldwide. So what religious organization has global influence? There's not been many. In fact, I would say there's not been any, with one exception. She dominates the beast, either the regime of the beast or the man himself, or probably both. The beast and his regime, of course, are very religious. They're not atheistic. You think about the Antichrist as being, again, he's not anti-Jesus. He's going to assume all the rights and privileges of Jesus. His regime is going to be maybe the most religious the world's ever been collectively. He's not atheistic. He thinks and he wants you to believe that he is God. That's far from atheism. It's the antithesis of atheism. So, influential, prostitute, dominates the beast, dressed in purple and scarlet, gold and jewels, in other words, just outwardly very wealthy, very attractive, will have a golden cup, although which gold is symbolic in the scriptures of God, but it's filled with all kinds of abominations and idolatrous things. And so she has a veneer of being from God or representing God, but on the inside, she's something that's not at all like God, not at all what God intended. So she's this abomination, this prostitution of what God intended. She has a title, Babylon the Great. Of course, links her at least symbolically to the city of Babylon. There was actually a city in Babylon. It's where the city of Babel is. Saddam Hussein spent millions of dollars recreating and unearthing and establishing. He saw himself as the new Nebuchadnezzar and all this stuff. And of course, he's not with us anymore. And Babylon, that Babylon has fallen into ruins. That Babylon has a great history. Many believe it's the resurrection of that city, that actual city. I'm not among them, because I don't think the force of the scriptures don't force us there. I think the force of the scriptures is somewhere else. So again, I'll make that clear here in a minute. She's, of course, the mother of prostitutes. She creates all these people who are religiously idolatrous. She's the persecutor of true believers. She herself is a prostitute, and the prostitution of the truth, and she persecutes anyone who stands up for the truth. She is associated with 7 hills, and many at this point would just simply say it's definitely Rome, because Rome is the only city ever known that way. And biblically, Rome is known as Babylon. You get to the New Testament. Here's what Peter says is conclusion to his first letter. She who is in Babylon, he's talking about the church, who is in where? Babylon. Peter never traveled to the Iraq, Middle Eastern, Euphrates River Babylon, as far as anyone knows. He did travel and did die in Rome. She who is in Babylon, I read that, Rome, elect together with you, greets you, as do Mark, my son. Of course, Mark is the one who takes the memoirs of Peter, according to early church fathers, and writes the book of Mark. Where did Mark get all his info from? He got it from Peter. This is Peter, in many ways. Mark is Peter's gospel, written through Mark and put together by Mark. So, but the early church fathers, a lot of historians agree, not just with this statement, but a large consensus agree that for a very long time Rome was called Babylon. And there was a very good reason for it. Because in Babylon, of course, if you remember the Babylonian religion that was created with Semiramis and Tammuz, and this supposedly incestuous relationship between a mom and a child, and they had the seasonal cycles based upon it, and they would, every year Tammuz would die, and then he would resurrect. He would die one day, and he would resurrect, and they would put in his place this trimmed Christmas tree, we call it today. It happened at the very same time, December 25th. Why do we have Christmas at that time when we're certain Jesus wasn't born those days? Why does the church have why is the church calendar pegged to paganism instead of the biblical calendar, which we can easily follow, but we don't do it? What happened there? Why did it change? Why do we have all these weird traditions around Christmas and Easter and Halloween and all? Where do these things come from? How do they become a part of the church? The answer is Babylon. Babylon was the place where this stuff was created. And of course, the original religion was created there by this woman who had to cover up her sleeping around. Basically, she came up with a child who was supposedly conceived after her husband was dead, but by her husband. So she's just lying. But she was a queen, and so she could lie and make everybody go along with it. So kind of the emperor had no clothes kind of thing. And so she creates this huge religion. Religion becomes pervasive in most of the culture. Babylon, of course, is the place where false religion and trying to get to heaven, if you will, without God, trying to become spiritual without God, building this tower. This is all just the theme of Babylon. It becomes pervasive. All the people, when they're scattered with all their languages, they take some semblance of this religion to the far reaches of the world, and we find similar things. We find pyramids. We find similar religions all over the world. So she becomes the mother, if you will, of all this prostitution, all this false religion. And this power seat was in Babylon, and Babylon was in power, was a center of power for centuries. And then Babylon is conquered. Babylon ceases to be really the center of operations under Persia, even comes less under center of operations under Greece. And as the power and money move west, Greece is in the west, the first nation to conquer Western peoples, to conquer the world. The power, and she moves with the power and money, this religion does. So it moves from Babylon to Pergamos. That's one in the 7 letters of 7 churches. You have Jesus saying, I know where you live, where the throne of Satan is. Satan can only be in one place. So where would he be? Most likely in the seat of wherever his powerful religion is, which at that time was Pergamos. And then it transferred from there to Rome, because why? Because the power and money continued to move west. So Greece was conquered by Rome, and so the power and money moved to the center of Roman culture, which of course was the city of Rome. It never left Rome. So today, interestingly enough, if you'll recall our study back in the fall, the Catholic Pope has the title of the high priest of that religion, of this old Babylonian religion, Pontifex Maximus. It's Latin for their high priest. He's the big guy, the Maximus. He's the big guy. How is it possible that a so-called Christian leader would have a title, not just recently, for more than 1,000 years, of this pagan high priest? That's how it happened. You had this wedding between the world, paganism, and the church, and they never got divorced. So we have this, and so you have these things. You have this Babylon being referenced here, but it's really talking about Rome, and so it's starting to give us a lot of clues here. Another clue about her is she rules of the kings of the earth. In the day of John's writing, this was unquestionably Rome. It's unquestionable that it would have been Rome, for John at least. The Vatican today, it remains sovereign. So Rome, so let's go over it. So Babylon was conquered by Persia. Persia was conquered by Greece. Greece was conquered by Rome. Rome was conquered by no one. Rome has not ceased to exist in power. The power of Rome basically was transferred in the void of the power void when Rome basically started falling apart. The bishop of Rome rose to power, and eventually these multiple bishops later, they forged a bunch of documents, if you remember talking about that, and they assumed all this kind of worldly, temporal power, and Rome became a major force. It was a spiritual force, but it controlled, literally, the kings of the earth. Rome continued to do what she had been doing, minus the armies and all the heavy-handedness, and we'll put you on a cross kind of thing. It basically said, listen, buddy, you're the king over there in Germany. I'm sorry, you're not German. You're from, Sweden? Norway. Over there in Norway, buddy. And let me tell you something, if you don't act good, then we're gonna kick you out of heaven. And you believe me because you don't have a Bible, which you need to buy one, man. And and so we hold power over you because you don't want to die and go to hell. And so you submit to the power of Rome, and Rome has continued to do that even to this day. Today, Rome has its own statutes, its own diplomatic embassies all over the world. The Vatican historically has persecuted believers, historically. One pope, Innocent III, if you remember our study, murdered more believers in one afternoon than all the Roman emperors combined, all their years. They killed a lot of people, the whole burning at the stake and feeding them to the lions. It was really bad for Christians. Innocent, the third beat him. Far from innocent. So let's get to the details of this, and so there's some broad generalities, and you can tell where I'm leaning with this, and I want you to form your own conclusions, but I want you to hear just what this says. So one of the seven angels comes and presents this to John, and he tells this woman, he shows this harlot who sits on many waters, and we have the interpretation of what those waters are down in verse 15, if you'll look down there. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits, notice, they are not, the water is symbolic of peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So this is, we know what these waters are. It's the same waters out of which the Antichrist comes up out of. It represents everything that isn't Israel, basically, waters, when they're used symbolically here. And they sure are. Verse 2, so she's committed these harlotries with the kings of the earth and acted immoral, and those who dwell on the earth were drunk with the wine of her immorality. And so Lenin said this, he said, religion is the opiate of the peoples, the same connotation. She's very religious. And so she enamors and she intoxicates them with the false religions that she purveys. And what happens to people when they're drunk and they're unaware of reality? They really, truly don't know what's going on. That's the whole purpose. I mean, she gets them drunk because she doesn't want them to know the truth. More atrocities have been committed in the name of religion than all others combined. You want to look at really bad stuff, look at under the heading of religion, not just Muslim. Christian actually have way outdone the Muslims as far as atrocities. Quote unquote Christians, that is. Control of the state by religion is never a good thing. I don't care who they are. You show me a country today that has religion and control of it, and I will show you a country you don't want to live in. Mexico. Many Middle Eastern countries. Why has the United States been good? Because religion hasn't controlled it. We're all good over here, though. We're all smart and white and good and superior, right? But we're none of those things. But we think we are. Give us control and we won't do what the rest of these idiots did. Oh, yeah, we will. How do I know that? Because I don't care what you are, what you look like. You're a sinner at heart. And sinners, with the kind of control that religion gives you, with no checks, which is, by the way, control with no checks and balances. Because I'm controlling you there in Norway, and who do I answer to? Only to God, and I'm already not answering to him. And so I can make you do whatever I want. And I own the only Bible. And so, you know what, man? You don't want to go to hell, and that's where I'm going to put you, because I have that kind of power. That's what happens when religion controls things. Never a good thing, unless it's God ordained. Of course, Israel was dominated by religion, but it was under the hand of God, and God was very quick to judge them when they stepped out from under that hand. And the coming ultimate final world regime is going to be religious. It's going to be Jesus. One world domination is going to be, as religious as it possibly can be. But because God's in charge, and not human beings, and not sinners, then we're going to be happy, and it's going to be a great place. But any other time, you do not want religion dominating. But she's a dominating religion, and thus very corrupt. She's in purple, it tells us in verses 3 and 4. Purple and red. Purple is the predominant color of Roman imperialism. It was their mark. The Roman senators wore this sash of purple. And the Roman emperor was distinguished from the Roman senators because he had a whole robe of purple. It was the color of Rome. What color was Rome? What metal did they use? They were known as the country of iron. What color did they use? Purple. It's the way they were known. So it marks, in that way, the color marks it as Rome. Another way, the next color, if you look there, verses 3 and 4, is scarlet, which is, of course, the color of the Vatican. Vatican, all the cardinals, what color is cardinal? Yeah, so what color is Rome still? It's either purple or red. You got it. You got it. These purples are not dominant in any other culture as in the same way that they have been in Rome. She has abominations is a word we've already said, but it's a word that is classically, essentially synonymous with idolatry. Let's take a look at several of those places where we can see that. Isaiah 44, verse 19. No one considers in his heart, this is God speaking of this people who are making idols, and they take one chunk of wood, and out of that same wood, they'll cut up firewood to cook food for themselves, and at the other chunk, they'll make some kind of idol. So I cut it up into wood, and it serves me, and then now I cut it up into some other kind of form, and I serve it. No one understands and considers in his heart. There is no knowledge, no understanding to say, I have burned half in the fire. Right? Yes. And I've also baked bread on it in its coals, and I've roasted meat on it and eaten it, and shall I make the rest of it into an abomination? What is he talking about? An idol. This is synonymous. The word abomination is synonymous in most cases of the Old Testament with idolatry. So I fall down before a block of wood. Here's another place, 2 Kings 23, verse 13. Been a lot of abominations in Israel, lots of idolatry, lots of falling away from God and worshiping and prostituting themselves, as it says there, prostituting themselves to these other gods. And then King Josiah, who was predicted way back there in earlier part of in 1 Kings actually, and he rises up and basically rids the land of all idolatry, at least briefly during his reign. The king defiled the high places that were east of Jerusalem, that would be the Mount of Olives, which are on the south of the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon, the king of Israel, had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of Sidonians. Listen to the way the writer of 2 Kings here, what he calls. He doesn't call it an idol, he calls it an abomination. The built Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the people of Ammon. So again, it's not really questionable at all what abominations refer to. They're referring to idolatry. Things set aside for God's purposes, but corrupted. They were corrupted in those purposes. So what is blasphemy? Blasphemy is any doctrine that attempts to add to or take away from that which has been completed. We're down there in verses 3 and 4. She's full of all these blasphemies. What does it say? The beast is covered with all of these blasphemies. What is that? What it means to commit blasphemy? It means to say something that God has put it's to erase the period at the end of a sentence that God has finished and add to that sentence. Or it's to take words out of that sentence and say, God didn't say that. That is an abomination. Adding to or subtracting from that which is completely finished. The greatest abomination is to take away from or add to the completed works of Christ, which is more than anything who this woman is. Adding anything to Christ's completed work is the epitome, the ultimate blasphemy. Clear contrast, though, here in verse 5, between the harlot and the virgin bride of Christ. On her forehead are written a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Wow, just such a difference between that and the church. Many groups, by the way, in verse 6 have killed the saints. It says here she's drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And when I saw her, he wondered greatly. But many have killed Christians. Many have. Of course, the Roman emperors did. Muslims have, on a large scale. But hear me carefully. No one has killed more Christians than the Roman Catholic Church. Not even close. Now, I'm not saying that the current Roman Catholic Church is out there killing people, although I'd have to say, honestly, I would not be shocked. But and let me just say this because it sounds like, okay, Pastor Bill, we're about to get our pitchforks and torches and we're going to march over that bridge and attack the Catholic Church. And that's not at all. This is not I'm not speaking anti-Catholic. I love the Catholics. So does Jesus. In fact, he died for them. And I know plenty of Catholics. In fact, I see one back there, used to be at least, right, Joan, who get saved while a Catholic. She's sitting over there. But get saved while being a Catholic. How do they get saved? The same way Baptists do, by reading the Bible, understanding the truth, and turning their life over to Christ. I mean, there's plenty of Catholics. We have a lot of them in this church. I've known a lot of them. I'm not anti-Catholic. I'm not anti any Catholic church or any Catholic people. I am, though, very clearly, let me say it clearly, I am anti-Roman Catholicism. Very clearly. Because it is anti-Scripture. And most importantly, anti-Christ. It is against Jesus. It does eliminate the salvation of Jesus in their very clear written doctrines. They do not believe that a person can place their faith in Christ at a single point in time, trust Him as Savior, and receive salvation and the remittance of sins permanently from that time on. They teach completely antithetical to that. They say you cannot do that. In fact, they say if you believe that, you're an abomination, and they commit you to anathema. In other words, they commit you to hell if you teach and believe that. So I just got committed to hell by saying that I don't believe that, which I'm okay with. Because I don't mind them saying I'm going to hell. Because I just told you, those who teach that, they themselves are going to hell according to the Scriptures. You do not add or take away from what the Scriptures clearly teach about who Christ is. And I don't care who you are, you put a name to it, whatever. It's headed up certainly in Roman Catholicism, but certainly Roman Catholicism is the largest purveyor of false doctrine. Largest purveyor of false doctrine. I haven't even touched on the whole idols and all the stuff. They're also the largest purveyor today of idolatry. You wonder where people are falling down in front of statues? There's lots of religions. Hinduism's one of them. Muslims definitely are not, although they do fall down in front of this the Kaaba there in Mecca. But mainly Muslims worship an unseen God, even though not the right one, but Allah is unseen. But not I shouldn't say not Roman Catholics. It's not every Roman Catholic does this, but Roman Catholicism promotes it heavily. And if you've never travel into Mexico. You want to see what paganism looks like, what idolatry looks like inside the Roman Church, and watch people. I watched a little old lady, no, a man. I'm sorry, a little old man, the Virgin Mary right there in front of him, just gigantic, tall as the ceiling, throwing himself on the ground over and over again in front of this, saying something in Spanish. I didn't understand enough Spanish at that time. Just repeating it over, just literally standing up and just falling flat on his face, just throwing himself on the ground in front of this gigantic idol. Where did he learn that? Well, it's prevalent in Roman Catholicism. It's taught. It's pushed. It is idolatry. It is an abomination. God hates it. Am I clear enough on that? I don't care who it is, what they call themselves. God is firmly against it. So they're promoters of prostitution, if you will. And there's a guy prostituting himself. Globally, they have been, and not just recently. Historically, we're talking about better than 1,000 years. So let's get to this issue, because I think, again, a key here is that John is shocked. John, the wise little old gentle, loving, the disciple of love here, but man, did he know his Bible really well, and he is blown away. When I saw her, I wondered greatly, and the angel was kind of taken aback. John, come on, man, you should have gotten this one. Didn't you see this coming? And John was just like, I just couldn't see this. I mean, do you really think, let's think about it for a second, that John would have been shocked if he'd been looking at actual the Roman Empire that he was currently being exiled under? He wouldn't have been shocked at all. What he was seeing was something different than he imagined. He thought this Babylon the Great, he's just clicking with it. Oh yeah, I know who Babylon is. That's Rome. But then it turns out to not be Rome, and the Emperor Rome, the Iron Rome. It turns out to be seemingly sweet, religious Rome. Can't believe it. It caught him. It blindsided him. Shouldn't have been surprised, John. He says there in verse 9, the agent says, "Why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns." And then we start getting to this very complicated thing. Verse 8, "The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction." So what you have here basically is this whole consistent with Roman Empire phase 2. So she was, and then she passes away, if you will. Remember, Rome's not conquered by anybody. She just basically dies. And then she's going to come back. And it's going to be spellbinding to people. And wouldn't it be spellbinding if we heard an announcement today on the news? The reconstitution of the Roman Empire. Wouldn't that be amazing? It would be. People are going to be spellbound by it. So she has, if you will, a death and a burial, and then a seemingly resurrection, and people are going to be inspired by that. And then also, so does her ultimate ruler, which is the Antichrist, of course. But first of all, is the regime being resurrected, and then this Antichrist is going to go through this same cycle, which raises, by the way, interesting things. Like I said, are we viewing at this rate the flow of world globalism? I mean, in the reconstitution of Europe, are we looking at the at least embryonically, are we looking at the reconstitution of Rome now? Are we? I think we are. Since, I will say this with confidence, since Rome dissolved into its respective entities, and they've changed names and shapes somewhat, but it turned into what we know today as Italy, as back into Greece, back into Turkey, back into France, back into Germany, back into Spain, back into England. When it turned into, these countries have changed borders and have fought, some have changed names to a certain degree, especially the German states. But since it dissolved into those things, many of these different empires have sought to reconstitute them. Napoleon Bonaparte, he tried to bring them all back together. That's part of his whole plan. He wanted to be the ruler over all of Europe. He almost did it. Spain tried. France, of course, under Napoleon tried. Italy has tried. Germany, most recently, has tried. Second World War, many of you sitting in this room were alive during that time, has tried it, but they were unsuccessful. And now, since Second World War, without war, in a time of peace, all these have come together. Well, I'd ought to send up a flag. Okay, peace? Things are coming together under the purpose of peace? Oh my goodness, so they're voluntarily doing this? We're headed down a road, I believe, and especially now that we're pushing so much globalism going on today, I think we're really headed there in a serious way. Rome is the only major city known throughout the world as the city of seven hills, verse 9. Here is in the mind that has wisdom, the seven heads are the seven mountains on which the woman sits. The only major city historically ever known that way. Almost eliminates all other cities. Like unquestionably, it's Rome. How is it going to, now to me, the only answer I'm looking for is really how is it Rome? Not what is it. I think we're kind of left without any options here. It kind of settles everything according to what Paul says in verse 18 in the present tense, according to what he says here about the seven mountains that these seven heads relate to. And they are also seven kings. Now, this is one where we've got to get down and get to our history here. There are also seven kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is current tense in John's day. And 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has yet to come. And when he comes, he must remain for a little while on the beach, which it was and is not as himself an 8th, but is also one of the 7, and he goes to his destruction. So in John's day, there were these 7 heads, if you will, were represented, let me just say, these seven heads all represent 7 hills. They also have another meaning. They represent 7 kings or kingdoms. Remember, the kings and kingdoms are synonymous with each other. Daniel said of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, had this dream. He says, you are the head of gold. Well, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't Babylon, but Babylon couldn't have been what it was without Nebuchadnezzar. And so effectively, they're one and the same. And when you think of Persia, you think of Cyrus the Great. When you think of Greece, you think of Alexander the Great. When you think of Rome, you think of the Caesars. I mean, sure, it was made up by large numbers of people and tremendous armies and large infrastructure and all kinds of money and all that kind of stuff. But yet it's the head, the representative was this whatever great ruler it was, depending on the circumstances. So these 7 kings and kingdoms are synonymous with each other. So 5, by the time John was living, 5 of these kingdoms had fallen. 1 existed. So let's first of all make sure we know who the 1 is. It's Rome. So we can put a marker down and say we know 1 of these 7 is Rome. But what were the previous 5? Well, we have in Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7, we have 4 kingdoms laid out for us. And those 4 kingdoms in Daniel 2 are represented by 4 different kinds of metal. Head of gold, chest of silver, chest and arms, waist and thorax of bronze, and then legs of iron. And so you have these 4 different kingdoms. We know who the leg of iron is. That's Rome. Who was the previous kingdom? Greece. Previous kingdom. Persia. Previous kingdom. Babylon. That only gives us 3 more, but it says there's 5 here. So there's 5 who were, well, don't forget, let's remember our history. There were 2 other kingdoms that claimed world dominance and also dominated Israel. There's other kingdoms, by the way, that dominated the world, but none dominated Israel. But there were 2 exceptions to that. Egypt dominated Israel, enslaved them and tried and killed them. Assyria dominated Israel, claimed world leadership, dominated Israel and enslaved and killed them. That gives us a total of 5. So if we started adding, Egypt was just conquered by who? By the Assyrians. The Assyrians was conquered by who? Babylonians. Babylonians were conquered by the Greeks. The Greeks conquered by the Romans. The Romans dissolved. They ceased to be. But at the time of John, they were present tense. So there we have 5 have fallen. 1 is, where am I here? 5 have fallen. There's 7 total. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other is yet to come. And when he comes, he must remain for a little while. So this is phase 2, phase 1, phase 2 of Rome. And the beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, but is also one of the 7. So he is, first of all, he is a part of the resuscitation of the Roman Empire. He's going to be, originally, remember, the resuscitation of the Roman Empire is going to be represented by these 10 kings. It will be reduced to 7 by 1 of those 10 kings. That 10 king is going to dominate the other 6, and he's going to become the Antichrist, the head of them all. And so he himself, though, is going to go through a phase 1 and a phase 2. So you have a phase 1 and a phase 2 of the regime. Phase 1 is already over. We're in the current now dead phase. Phase 2 of the Roman regime is going to be the revival of the Roman Empire, revival of the Roman regime. But that revival is going to be headed by one of 10 kings who are going to lead that revival. He's going to reduce it down to 7 kings, and then himself is going to exalt himself. And then he's going to be killed 3.5 years later. And he's going to enter into a phase 2, a supernatural phase, unlike any other king we've ever had. We've had tremendous kings that have ruled this world, very, very gifted, talented, able, enabled by God to do all kinds of feats with unbelievable armies and incredible amounts of money, but none were supernatural. That's going to be the breaking point for him. He's not going to be like, he's going to be everything that they were, with the exception of he's going to be supernaturally empowered. Again, God's going to allow this. This is who the Antichrist is. So he's going to wield a power that no one else has. And again, it's supernatural. So what does that mean? Very religious. So he actually, even though Nebuchadnezzar claimed to be God at some point, even though Cyrus claimed to be God, even though the pharaohs named themselves after the sun god Ra and all this stuff, they were never actually gods. They were just a dude that you could poke a hole in. But this guy, however they kill him, they poke a hole in him, he comes back to life. Oh, not the same. Not the same. Who is able to make war against the beast? Who is able? I mean, you shoot him and he comes back to life. This is scary movie stuff, right? It's not a movie. It's real. So he himself, even though being one of the 7, will actually transform the kingdom into an 8th kingdom, because it will go from being as much as man can produce with our natural powers to being a natural power undergirded with this supernatural power that comes from Satan, which God allows him to have. And so that will take us into the worst times the world's, of course, ever known. So again, basically just a brief summary of what takes place here with these 7 heads, these 10 horns. The beast which was there, and the 10 horns which you saw are the 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. So yeah, they're a part of the Roman Empire, but he's saying, John, you're not looking at them right now. And I'd say for us, we're not looking at them right now. I don't think. Maybe we are. Maybe we're seeing the beginnings of them. We don't know who they are, though. We will know when they get down to 10, whoever they are, who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. And that's, again, that is not an exact time stamp. It's basically just saying it's super short. They're going to have, 7 years is not long. In fact, that's very short for a kingdom of this kind of power, for sure. You would think with that kind of power, that kind of undergirding of supernatural ability, if they would last forever and ever. And that's what the people are going to believe. They're going to take the mark. This is it. This is the final thing. This is the final kingdom. We love him. We want him. He's everything. We worship him. We give everything to him. We'll take his mark. We'll take the number of his name. And they fall for the ruse. But these will give their power, it says. The purpose is to give their power and authority to the beast. And these will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them because he is the Lord of Lords. Of course he is. Of course he's going to overcome them. Those who are with him are called the chosen and faithful. He's not talking about angels, he's talking about us. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes, nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast. So here's a clue. We've been now off on the beast for a minute. Now we're going to be back because they're related to each other. Because the beast comes to power by allowing the woman to ride him on the back. So she's getting a free ride, but it won't last for free very long. She's going to come to her pinnacle here. This entity, this woman has had dips and valleys, hills and valleys, but she's going to come to an absolute crescendo under the beast, because she's going to ride in under his power, and he's going to be, if you will, come in on her skirt tails. And the woman, the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, which will hate the harlot. Why? They got all this power and money. Who wants to be vice president, though? I want to be president. So, unlike any other kingdom, even though you hated me up there in Norway, you couldn't stop me down in Rome. Even though the Germans hated me, and the Spaniards hated me, and the French hated me, and the Italians hated me, because Rome dominated Italy. It's a terrible, terrible place to be. and Turkey hated me, and Russia hated me. In fact, the Pope in Russia also anathematized me, and I anathematized him, and the church split right down the middle, east and west. So you have the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church. Roman Catholic Church dominated, still dominates over them. So everybody hates me, but they can't stop me. They can't get rid of me because I hold this, I'll send you to hell, if you will, bottom line. And so who's going to march against that? This guy, claiming to be God, has one-ups her, if you will. You can't send me to hell because I'm God. I own heaven. And so, whammo, he's got the power, he's got the authority, he's got the opportunity, and he destroys her. And chapter 18 is all about the destruction. But I want you to notice what it describes here. These 10 kings hate the harlot, will make her desolate and naked, will eat her flesh. Remember, she's not literal. I mean, she is literal, but how can you eat the flesh of a city? There's no flesh in it. So it's descriptive, and it's sending us to places. So we sort of have a trifecta of things coming together here. And so I want us to run to a couple places. We saw this back when we were studying the Thyatira, the study of the church at Thyatira. And if you want a thorough handling of that, you need to go back to that study, which is back in the fall. We handle this here. But first of all, it takes us back to a particular woman in the book of 1 Kings, a woman by the name of Jezebel, who becomes the wife of Ahab, and she's the daughter of Ethbaal, who is the high priest of Ashtoreth up there in Lebanon. And she's wicked. She's terrible. And somehow, though, being a Gentile, Ahab still marries her. He adds one more atrocity to all the things that he's doing and breaking God's laws by marrying this wicked woman. She comes in with force to bring her religion into Israel. She's going to eradicate all of Israel of all the faith that they have in God. She kills the prophets of God. She destroys them. This is during Elijah's reign, if you remember it. And Elijah pronounces a curse on the land for 3.5 years. And that's how we know who Elijah is here in Revelation. Because you have the same 3.5 years in which there's no water. The same thing happened in the Old Testament. Elijah did the same thing. And this woman tries to kill him, tries to kill everyone, and Elijah has this big pity party, runs from her, and all that story. But one of the things that she does, which I think is important for us to grasp, is there's one particular story that she does on behalf of her husband. Ahab wanted to buy the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite right outside the city of walls, because it's right outside of his palace. And he says, it's nice for me to have that piece of plot of land because I can tend it and it can be right there next to me. He goes out there and offers it. And Naboth says, I can't sell you. I will not sell you what I've been inherited from my fathers. God had a rule. You don't sell the land of your ancestors. It stayed in the family. And so Ahab gets all puffy and goes back home and he cries in his pillow. And Jezebel, on the other hand, knows how to take care of business. And she does it a very particular way. She does it through what we would call today an inquisition. She sets up a false court, false statements, has false witnesses come and lie about Naboth that he cursed God and the king. They take him outside of the city and they stone him. They trump up charges and they kill him and they take his land and they take his property. That is if you want to know what happened during the Middle Ages, that is what the church did. They did it in spades. They conquered lands literally that way because I have that kind of power. So you're afraid of me over there in Norway because me being the Pope or me being the strength of Rome, which is a religious strength. You know that I can show up and do that to you because you've seen it happen. And so you just pray I don't put you in the Inquisition. But I come to your servant over here. Maybe I should make you the king and make him the servant. I come to your servant over here because I'm mad at you, but I still want you on the throne because I put you there because I have that kind of power. But I show you what kind of power I have because I know he owns, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of acres of forest land, which we in Rome would like to get our hands on. And so I come in and just form an inquisition. I trump up charges against you. Of course, who's going to disagree with powers of Rome? We'll have you killed. And in the kindness, our benevolent, God-given, lovely hearts will just take over your thousands of acres of woodland. How sweet is that? They did it all the time. Killed hundreds of thousands of people that way. It was the MO of the Roman Catholic Church. For 1,000 years, this is the way they did things. And so, is it a coincidence that the way that they did things and the way that Jezebel did things is exactly the same? And how did she die? Do you remember? She gets thrown down from an upper story, lands on the ground. They trample her with horses. They go in to have a beer and celebrate. They come back outside, and the dogs have eaten her. Remember, there was nothing but a skull and hands and feet left. Wow, is that coincidental, or is that actually pointing us to what's happening here in the book of Revelation? In fact, in Revelation chapter 3, chapter 3, we have this whole church at Thyatira, which represents the middle-aged church, which was the church of Rome. And you have in there this woman who's called Jezebel, who's making all this trouble. To me, if you put these three things together, you have a trifecta that tells us exactly who this woman is. She, again, is the Roman church. She's the Roman church in her greatest, or I should say, worst conditions. And so, again, you have here in verses 17 and 18, John speaking in the present tense. She is, notice, the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. She is this. So we can't steer it, I don't think, in the Middle East and say it's Babylon over there. I think we're left with a spiritual Babylon, which is what she remains to be to this day, which is Rome itself. We're left with no other conclusion. And you may not like that conclusion. Again, I'm not anti-Catholic or anything. I am anti-Catholicism very easily. And any one of you who believe in Christ and believe what the Bible teaches about Christ, when you read what their doctrine say, you'll be right with me on that, trust me. But we don't have time to go over all that. But again, this is not an anti-Catholic thing. We love the Catholics. So let's give a summary here. Arising out of the rubble of ancient Roman Empire will come a new Roman Empire destined for more fame and more power than the first. At her head of the Roman Empire will be 10 kings who will be reduced to 7 by one of their own. He himself will rise to the top, and all will serve him. A part of his rise will be the dominance of the religion of Rome, which, in fact, will be superior to the beast, at least for a time. When the beast has used her influence all he can, he's ridden on her skirt tails as far as he can, he and the other kings, the remaining 6 kings, will destroy her in a catastrophic way. So that's the summary. That's where things have headed. And so now we're ready here. We've already been at it for a while, but let's go ahead and read chapter 18. It'll just be a brief, it'll be just really reading, because all it is basically a eulogy. We know who she is now. And now let's read her eulogy, what she did, what's going to happen to her. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." This double emphasis means it's just going to be with such great force. And she has become a dwelling place, notice, of demons, and a prison of every unclean spirit. And frankly, a lot of people want to travel to Rome, and I may travel there someday, but I really don't want to, because I don't want to be where these are. She's become a dwelling place of demons, and a prison of every unclean spirit, and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth, notice, global dominance. The kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. Just read the history of the Roman Catholic Church for the past 1,000 years. This is reads just like their history. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins." So notice, she is an actual city. There's people living there who need to get out before God renders judgment. It's sort of like Sodom, Lot leaving and his family leaving Sodom and Gomorrah kind of thing. So you will not participate in her sins, and may not receive the plagues, for her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back, even as she has been paid. Give back to her double according to her deeds, and the cup in which she is mixed twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment morning and morning. For she says in her heart, "I sit as queen, and I am not a widow, and I will never see mourning." For this reason, in one day, her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for the Lord God who judges her is strong. Of course, he's going to use these kings, the Antichrist, to do it, but nonetheless, it is God as authority who accomplishes this. And the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment. Woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her because no one buys her cargoes anymore. So she's this major world power with tremendous money and influence, and now it's all gone. And so their business is gone. Cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood and bronze and iron and marble and cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense. It just keeps going on. And wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives. Wow, she dealt in everything. She brokered everything. And the fruit you long for has gone from you. And all the things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. And the merchants of these things who became rich because of her will stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, she who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet. There's the same imagery again. It's got to be wrong. Adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such a great wealth has been laid waste, and every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor and many as who make their living by the sea stood at a distance and were crying out as they saw the smoke of the city, saying, What city is like the great city? Not been any like it. And they threw dust on their heads and were crying out, weeping and mourning, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth, and for in 1 hour she had been laid waste. Rejoice. It's the second time only in the book of Revelation that you're told to rejoice. And the first time has slipped my mind where that was. The first time we were told to rejoice was when Satan is thrown out of heaven to earth. So that's in Revelation 12. This is the second time you're told to rejoice. Rejoice over her, O heavens, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her, because she murdered them. She killed them. And the strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus will Babylon the Great be thrown down with violence and will not be found any longer. And the sound of harpists and musicians. Notice it's a real place. It's not an imaginary place. It's a place where people live. It's a place where musicians live and work. Merchants ply their trade. The sound of the harpists and the musicians and the flute players and the trumpeters will not be heard in you any longer, and no craftsman of any craft will be found in you any longer, and the sound of a mill will not be heard in you any longer, and the light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will not be heard in you any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her were found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. And so there you have it. She's this very important role player in the end times. Sort of small change today, sort of, not completely. The Vatican has lots to say today, if you hadn't noticed. You ever thought about, what's this religious dude doing up there with all these political guys? What's he doing? And they're not calling me. Billy Graham occasionally, right? His son occasionally, but they're not calling him or any of them to sit in any kind of decision-making process. But they do call the Pope. Why are they doing that? And why do they as a global church have so much wealth, own so many things and properties, have so much control? Now, why? Just questions to ask. Again, you may not hold to the same position that I hold. I can't totally prove everything, but I think I'm certainly convinced. I would recommend to you, here's some reading for you. There's a book written by a guy by the name of Ted Hunt, and he writes a book, and there is a video out called A Woman Who Rides the Beast. I would highly recommend his book to you. It's a book about this thick, by the way. And he classifies everything that this says and shows you how Rome, it could be nothing other than the Roman Catholic Church. He gives you statistic at like no rock left unturned kind of guy, so it gets a little dry. But he just basically does it. I give you a basic generalization and I say, believe me and go research it yourself kind of thing. Ted Hunt doesn't let you do that. He makes sure that he doesn't trust your researchability. He does it all for you. So, but I would recommend his video actually is about 45 minutes long. I used to have a possession of it, and it's on VHS, and VHS is back in the dark ages. But if we could find it it's probably on YouTube. You probably could catch up with it on YouTube. I'd recommend watching it. Truly would. Because man, does he lay it down. He really does. All right. So let's pray, and we will run out of here. God, we thank you that you alone can tell us these things. You reveal these things. We see how you brought this angel to John because there was something else that John needed to see, because there was something else he needed to tell us. And Lord, that's the way you work. You just make sure that there's a way that you get the information to us. Lord, I pray we would be open to that information. We would listen throughout the week. Every day, God, you're giving us revelations about our life, about ourselves, about the world we live in. You're speaking to us and leading us into a deeper relationship with you so that we'll become not less dependent or independent, but we even more dependent upon you. You're the only one who knows anything that's true, and you're the only one who can lead us into that truth. So we commit ourselves to you today. I pray that we represent you well as we go from here. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for visiting. Find us at www.islandbaptistchurch.org.